Okay, hello everyone. I'm just going to be a moment here as we're just going to get the webcam going. There we go. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Reality Whisperer Webcast today. I am your host, Brad Johnson, and I'm very happy to be here today with our special guest, Joshua P. Warren. So, Joshua, thank you so much for being on the Reality Whisperer Webcast today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're going to have a really great show for everybody tonight. We're going to be looking into, again, the Force. We're going to be looking into psionics. Sorry, not psionics, radionics, but of course psionics has a part of that. Radionics, and of course the paranormal. So before we begin, there's just a couple of announcements. Our our Reality Whisperer webcast is every Tuesday night. So next week we're also going to have a special guest from the Secret Space Program Inside. That is Johnny Alpha. He is a Secret Space Program insider, had a lot of experience on Mars, and is going to be talking about his experiences decades past as well next week. Also thanking our sponsors today, portaltoascension.org. Again, live conscious events that are going to be taking place starting in June. I'm actually having a dream mastery workshop, taking place on the Portal to Ascension website that will be coming up here in the end of June. And of course, there is also the Pot of Gold YouTube channel, which again is an associate of ours. And again, you can just type in capital P-O-T of capital G-O-L-D YouTube channel on YouTube, and you can go and check out his information. He has a lot of great compilation videos, of course, as well. But again, my special guest here tonight is Joshua P. Warren. Oh my goodness, I'm like completely off the hook tonight. Joshua P. Warren, my apologies. So I'm going to just go ahead and read out Joshua's bio, and then we're going to be talking more to Joshua tonight about a lot of his work. It's very fascinating. Joshua P. Warren is an investigator who pioneers the amazing relationship between the mind, energy, matter, and strange phenomena. He owns the Asheville Mystery Museum and Laboratory in North Carolina, and the Bermuda Triangle Research Base in Puerto Rico, which is where he is tonight as well. The author of over 20 best-selling books, including the Use the Force and the Wishing Machine Workbook, he has appeared on numerous TV programs on History Channel, Discovery, National Geographic, Animal Planet, Sci-Fi, TLC, and started on the Travel Channel series Paranormal Paparazzi. He travels the world investigating mysterious phenomena and made the cover of a science journal in 2004 for lab experiments regarding energy fields in nature. As the creator of the wildly popular Wishing Machine Project, he has helped thousands of people around the world change their lives in profound ways, manifesting extremely good fortune. To see mind-blowing photos and videos glimpsing into other realms of consciousness, visit his website at joshuapwarren.com. That's joshuapwarren.com. This is a heck of an introduction, Josh.
It
So,
sounds almost like I wrote it myself, doesn't
yeah,
it?
maybe a little bit. But I guess, really the first question is, like, how did this all begin for you, like, really getting into this kind of field?
Well, I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, the heart of the oldest mountains in North America, and I grew up hearing all kinds of interesting legends and old wives' tales and Native American stories that sort of inspired my imagination. But there was one incident in particular that actually occurred to my family, which really stuck with me. And when I was a kid, this made me very curious. Before I was born, during the Great Depression, my grandmother, a woman named Virginia Calloway, she was quite young at the time. I'm going to say 12 or 13 years old, and her family lived in this big country house out in an area called Barnardsville, North Carolina. And she was given a gift as a birthday present, which was quite nice at that time. She got a camera because they were sort of well off until the Depression finally ruined their finances. But anyway, she got this camera and she was experimenting. And one day, her older brother, a guy named Claude, and their father, a guy named Jack, came back from a hunting trip in the mountains. And she asked them to pose with their kill. It was small game. They had little squirrels and rabbits. And so she took a picture of these two, and it created this just fantastic classic image of these two old rugged mountaineers sort of standing there, holding their kill. But the weird thing is, her older brother, again Claude, did not have a head in the photograph. It literally developed with a transparent head. Okay, you could see the vegetation behind him, and they knew that was bizarre, but they didn't understand enough about photography to realize just how bizarre it truly was. Fast forward a month later, Claude was sitting on the porch. This is on a summer afternoon, and he was reading a copy of his favorite publication called Western Magazine, Old Gunslinger Tales. And he was conversing with Jack, his father, through an open window while his father was in the kitchen fixing lunch for the two of them. And at one point, Jack said something to Claude, and Claude didn't respond. And he repeated himself, and Claude didn't respond. Well, when lunch was ready, Jack went outside, and here on the porch is the copy of the magazine, but there's no Claude. An hour went by. Where the heck did Claude go? Hours went by. People were coming home. Has anybody seen Claude? The next day, nobody had still seen him, and they got the authorities. They went out, they scoured the woods, and my great uncle, Claude Calloway, was never seen again. It was literally as if he had vanished in mid-conversation in the blink of an eye. And that was a big tragedy in my family because they never had closure from that. They never got over it. And it seemed as if his fate was foretold in this photograph a month before. And this made a profound impact on me. It made me very curious about the mysterious. It made me wonder about other dimensions. Can you just, sort of pop into another dimension? Can you be abducted by an alien? I mean, what happened to him? When I became an adult, I even went there and I interviewed every elderly person who was around, and they all told me the same version of events. I hired a forensic historian to follow the paper trail, and the paper trail of his life, census records, employment records, etc., all ended that day. And so when I was a teenager, I started writing stories about strange things happening in the mountains. I published my first book when I was 14. I started writing professionally for the local newspaper when I was 15. And now this fall I'll be 40 years old, and the quest continues.
Well, it sounds like you've had just an amazing experience relating to this kind of phenomenon, especially to have something like that happen to your uncle. That's a little crazy. But like with you as well too, like what do you feel like really still, because you had this experience with your uncle, did this kind of get you into a vast amount of expertise relating to like psychic ability, paranormal? Did you want to just kind of study a certain area, or did you feel like this was all just kind of open game relating to what you wanted to work with when you got older?
Well, that's a great question, because in the beginning I was really sort of focusing on spiritual activity because that's what I had the easiest access to growing up in that area with a lot of haunted buildings, and that's obviously what a lot of people do. But what I discovered as time went on, and I think anybody who becomes a serious paranormal investigator, given enough time, will probably tell you this, is that eventually, if you start really studying this stuff and you dig your teeth into it and you don't let go, you start to see that at a certain point, ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, psychic phenomena, all actually sort of relate to one another in a very interesting way. I'm fond of that quote by Charles Fort, "You can measure a circle beginning anywhere." And when you start to look at what these things have in common, the first thing that I realized is that they have time anomalies in common. So if we take ghosts, frequently we are talking about some presence from the past. Not always, but often. I wrote a book called How to Hunt Ghosts that came out in 2003, and I described all different kinds of ghosts from different eras. But again, we're talking about time as an obvious element there. When it comes to UFOs, you have these cases when, say, a guy is riding down the road in Texas, and all of a sudden a UFO appears over his truck. The truck instantly stops, and then the UFO flies away and the truck starts working again. It's not like the guy had to turn the ignition as if it killed the engine. It's almost as if time itself had stalled while this thing was overhead. And then, of course, when it comes to cryptids, you have all these instances when somebody is following a cryptid and they're looking at the tracks in the dirt, and all of a sudden the tracks just end, and nobody can figure out where this thing went. It has somehow shifted its position in space. And we know that space and time are part of the same thing. And so, once again, we have a time anomaly attached to this. And when it comes to this whole idea of radionics, of psychic phenomena, time and space seem to be very, very flexible relating to these particular terms. And so over the years, I've written about all these topics, but certainly what I've been working on with radionics and the wishing machine is a very important, crucial part of the research that I'm now doing, because aside from using these devices to do all the usual stuff, to bring in more money or to have better relationships and all those things, I also use them to enhance paranormal phenomena, especially when I know I'm going to have a limited opportunity to go somewhere and investigate. I went to Transylvania in Romania in 2012 and spent 2 weeks spending the night in haunted castles that were once owned by Vlad the Impaler, and I knew this was a rare opportunity. I wanted to have the highest chances of experiencing something paranormal, so I contacted Dr. Mulder, whom we'll talk about soon, and said, hey, see what you can do to enhance the activity while we're there. He took a blueprint of the castle, and he worked with radionics to help enhance the activity. Now, he wasn't there with us in Romania. He was thousands of miles away. But again, time and space don't necessarily seem to be relevant when it comes to some of these topics.
Exactly. It's all frequency, vibration, energy in that way. So basically, being in Transylvania Castle, what was it like being in there? Was it kind of well taken care of, or was it kind of just very old and mucky, or how was the decor in that area?
Well, there are a number of castles that he sort of considered part of his domain during his lifetime. The top castle, the one he really lived in most of the time, was called Poenari. And it is now in ruins, but it's still impressive. It's at the crest of this huge craggy mountain, and you have to walk up something like 1,500 steps to get there to the top of it.
Crazy. When
When you get there, there's this huge sort of yawning canyon right next to you. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And that was cool just to be in those ruins. But the castle that really blew my mind the most was not the one that a lot of the tourists go to as Dracula's castle. And the name escapes me right now of this particular one. These are weird names, and this has been a few years ago. But we went into one of these castles, and I had a laser grid. Now, if your viewers have never seen one of these before, they've been employed over the past few years more and more in ghost investigations. It's basically a laser pointer, but it's got a little tip on it that takes the laser light and it splits it into hundreds of little points of light, so that it literally creates a grid. So you're taking this one single straight light and you're turning it into hundreds of other straight little points of light. So if anything moves between that laser and whatever you're shining it toward, like a wall, you're going to immediately see it, because it's going to break up that very nice laser pattern. And so at one point, my wife Lauren and I were in the ballroom of this castle, and it might have been the Castle Braun we were at. I'll probably think of it, but anyway, this was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. We were the only people in this ballroom, sitting there watching this huge, empty, dark space. And all of a sudden, I see the clear figure of what looks to me to be a man, and my wife agrees, go walking across the room. Now, I instantly think somebody else, a physical person, because I was there with a group, had walked or was walking through. And so I turned on the light, and there was nobody there. And I turned the light back off, and I could see this thing continuing to walk around, this shadowy form, and break up that laser grid. that was one of many weird things that happened to me in Transylvania, but I'll never forget how distinct it was to see a human form gliding around that building that night.
So was it exactly like a human being, or was it kind of like a silhouette, or you could actually see like facial features of this entity walking through?
I couldn't see facial features. I would say it was probably about 10 to 15 feet in front of us. It appeared to be 5 to 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, which is why I say it looked masculine to me, and it looked like it had some kind of a hat or some kind of headgear on, walking through. And you know what's funny is that right after that happened, we went into another part of the castle, which was a chapel back, hundreds of years ago. And I was in there with my wife and 2 other people. And we locked the doors because at that point we were in an area that was sort of cordoned off, and we could make sure that nobody else was in there. And we wanted to try to record some EVP type recordings. Mm-hmm. So we turn on the audio recorders, and we hear what sounds like. What was that? And so I turn on the flashlight, and I start seeing little pebbles bouncing around the floor. I said, "Is this place falling apart?" And then at that point, all 4 of us actually started being pelted with these pebbles out of the darkness, out of nowhere. I mean, we're looking around, and I mean, it stung. They weren't, fortunately, these are not big rocks, but I mean, these are stinging little pebbles. Mm-hmm. And we videotaped this. We had plenty of audio recordings of the little pebbles bouncing around, and they were coming from the sides. They were not coming from the ceiling. And this happened not just to me that night, but to a number of people around the grounds. There were people who said they got shoved and pushed. So, but the thing is, when you take a place like that, with a history like that, there's so much that is capable of occurring there. You can't even take one incident and say, well, this must be because in 1484, such and such died here, or what. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know what caused it. Mm-hmm. It's different than if you go into the old house where old man Withers died, and you know that it's his ghost that haunts the bedroom. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the frustrating things about paranormal research is that usually often you're going to these places that have such a full and varied history, whether it's prisons or asylums or whatever. You don't even have a way of pinpointing the origin of the activity.
Mm-hmm. Do you have often at times like mediums or remote viewers that would go with you? Maybe just kind of get an idea about, maybe it's just kind of, I'm feeling like there's maybe an older man, maybe feeling a lot of anger or anything like that. Has there been kind of like occurrences with that, like having these kind of crewmates with you in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, I have, I think I calculated it recently, and I can safely say that I have now investigated between 900 and 1,000 supposedly haunted or paranormally active sites. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I have taken a lot of different types of people with me. In some cases, I've taken physicists, I've taken rocket scientists, every type of historian, and many different psychics, sensitives. And, what I find is that there is often a really interesting correlation between what you pick up with your instrumentation and what somebody who has this sensitivity will tell you. For example, I like to go into places that I like to bring in my little kit, my little ghost hunting kit or whatever that's got all my EMF meters and electrostatic devices and Geiger counters and infrared and ultraviolet cameras and you name it.
Yep.
I like to go in there first by myself and measure as much as I can about the environment to see if anything seems anomalous or out of the ordinary. And then I will go back and I will ask if there is a psychic or a sensitive, if he or she would like to come in without giving that person any information about what I've just found. And I will watch to see if that person points out a place that is significant. Over the years, I've worked with many different psychics, again, sometimes on TV programs, but more often privately. There's one psychic in particular in North Carolina named Angela Moore, who is extremely good at pinpointing places where haunted activities happen. And I've been in the field with her time and time again, where I don't tell her anything about the history of the place, and she'll just walk in. She'll go right to the point, or right to the spot where the equipment was giving me all kinds of weird, anomalous feedback, and she'll say, something happened here, and she'll start describing what she senses or what she sees. Mm-hmm. And you know, Brad, after doing these kinds of experiments, I've come to, I guess I don't know if I can quite call it a theory, but we'll call it a hypothesis. You know how when you go to, say, Walmart, the items have this little passive RFID tag on them.
Yeah.
Now, these tags, they don't produce any energy on their own. But if you try to take that item out of the store and you pass through the exit, there are devices there that are broadcasting an energy field. Mm-hmm. And when that energy field hits the passive RFID tag, it activates it. It kind of awakens it, if you will. And suddenly this thing starts sending signals back, and then the alarm goes off. Well, I've come to believe, I guess you could say, that everything that we do is somehow recorded in the environment like a bunch of passive RFID chips, just sort of sitting there all around us. And sometimes when a particular person goes into a particular setting and they shine their consciousness upon this sort of dormant information, that if it's the right frequency, then it will activate that information the same way that those sensors at the Walmart exit activate those passive RFID chips, and suddenly these things, they start showing you what happened. They start sending information back to you. Yes. And that's why some people can go into a paranormally active site and they see nothing, they feel nothing, they sense nothing. And that could be because of genetics, or it could be because that they have decided for themselves they don't want to be open to the possibility, and that determines what they're even going to be able to perceive to begin with. Mm-hmm. But in other cases, you have people who say, look, I'm tormented by this because I can't shut it off. Like everywhere I go, I'm seeing things that have happened in the past, or I'm feeling information. And what you realize is that if everything is being sort of stored in some form around us, if we are able to properly understand ghost research, which a lot of people sort of flippantly dismiss, and we are able to better understand that connection between the observer and the environment, we might actually someday be able to create a piece of technology that allows us to tap into that information. Imagine a camera. You can go somewhere, you can look through the goggles, and you can tune through the days, through the years, and you can actually observe what happened at other points in history. Now, if that ever occurred, that would revolutionize the world, and in some ways it would be good because it would clarify the truth about what happened in certain instances. In other cases, it would be terrible because it would shatter a lot of beliefs that people are currently using to sort of, hold their world together. But this is one of the technical applications that could actually come from people understanding the connection between ourselves and the environment, given this thing called the ghostly realm or the psychic or the spiritual.
And I think that's a good leeway to kind of connect with the Force as well too, because we're going to get right into that as well too. So again, a lot of Star Wars fans I think that are on my channel. What is your perspective as we're talking about the Force, being able to bring this in regards to a lot of the discussion that we're having tonight?
Well, I've always been a big Star Wars fan. I was a child of the 70s, and like so many others, this idea of the Force always sort of resonated with me. It felt like there maybe was something more real about it than fiction. And so as I got older, I researched this more and more. And as a matter of fact, I want to point out one of the great synchronicities of my life. I'm going to shamelessly show my book here. This is my book, Use the Force, A Jedi's Guide to the Law of Attraction.
Very nice.
This book came out last year, and when I started writing this book, I did not know that there was a new Star Wars movie coming out, and I certainly didn't know it was going to be called The Force Awakens. So I kind of felt like I was tapping into the Force by even writing this book. But, you know, the Force is defined within Star Wars as an energy field that surrounds us and penetrates us and binds the galaxy together. But if you want to look at that from a more scientific point of view, you could compare it to the Higgs field, which of course is the big thing in physics right now. If you want to look at it from a social point of view, you could compare it to the internet. I mean, here you are in Canada, I'm in Puerto Rico, there are people all over the world, and we're all coming together through this medium. This is sort of a crude model for what I think is possible in reality. But I like looking at the Force from an engineer's point of view. And what I mean by that is I think you can best describe this in terms of what an engineer might call sympathetic resonance. So if we have a room that is empty except for 2 pianos, and a man walks into that room and he goes up to one piano and bangs a chord, that same chord will play on the other piano, even though he has not gone anywhere near it. You can also do this with tuning forks. I've done it many times. There are videos of people doing this on YouTube. You take a tuning fork and an identical tuning fork, you strike one, and the other one will ring even though you haven't touched it. What this shows you is that when you send out a signal, then that signal, it activates a corresponding signal that is sent back to you. This is used in all kinds of technical applications as well. And I've always been interested in trying to understand, again, that relationship between the mind, the body, and the environment, and what the limits of that may be. Whether we're looking at ghosts or UFOs or psychic phenomena, or we're simply trying to apply it in our own lives to improve our own human experience. And I found that this also plays into why some people might experience more of the paranormal. They're sending a signal out which is activating this. On the other hand, you have people who don't care anything about the paranormal, and they decide to take this principle and apply it toward their business or their health or their relationships, or basically manifesting things in an almost magical way. And I've done a lot of research talking to people who are professional gamblers, people who are CEOs of very successful companies, and asking them, do you think that there's something psychic about you that allows you to do this stuff, to get all this money or to have all the success that you've had? And in every single case, every person I've talked to has said, well, I do think that I have something, okay? They don't all call it ESP. Some call it a hunch. Mm-hmm. Some call it intuition. They put different labels on it. But every one of them will say this is more than simply taking empirical data and processing it. So they are basically in tune with some kind of an idea or some kind of concept that they are able to sort of shape and receive energy around them. And I've always been intrigued with the field called cymatics. If you take something like an audio speaker and you put a piece of cardboard on top of it and sprinkle a thin film of sand on that speaker and then turn it on, well, that sand will snap into all kinds of different beautiful patterns. You can also do this three-dimensionally with like cornstarch and water and sort of semi-liquid substances, and you can see forms rise and fall. What this shows us is that you have to tap into some type of an energy mold or create some kind of an energy mold that the physical world can sort of then rearrange itself to sort of snap into. There's physical matter just sort of dispersed all over the place out there, but it's just sort of bouncing around. You create an energy mold, well, suddenly it'll stick to it and it'll adhere, and things begin to take place and to happen. And so in Use the Force, I decided I was going to use the analogy with Star Wars, because that's very easy for everybody to visualize. Most of us have seen the movies. and go back and research everything I could about philosophy, theology, physics, metaphysics, and see how it all applied to the idea of this ever-present energy field that we can all tap into. And it's something that you can do on your own, absolutely organically, or you can use tools, magic wands, or other devices that might help you connect your thoughts with what you believe. But obviously, the thing that is the absolute most effective is the radionics machine or the wishing machine. And I learned this personally 15 years ago, before I ever even had any clue how this was possible and how it was happening. And I started having great experiences, and I'm happy to share those with you if you'd like.
Oh, great. Absolutely.
Well, I bought my first so-called wishing machine from a man in California. And I've always been a tinkerer. I have a laboratory at my museum in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm just always curious. I like to experiment with new little wacky gadgets. And if I buy something and it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. To me, it's an experiment. So there was this fella selling these boxes. Now, of course, I'm sure your viewers already know what a radionics box looks like. If not, this is one. This is called a Use the Force box. This is a nice model. It's got an input plate. It's got an output plate. This one has 9 knobs on it. And basically what you do is you put something on the input plate to represent what you want to manifest. And then you go through a very simple process of tuning these knobs, and you use the output plate to help you do that. And when you're finished, you put the box away, essentially, and it sits there and it works on your behalf. And so I bought one of these for $300. And as soon as I got the box, the first thing I decided to wish for was my $300 back. Made sense to me, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I have since found that there are actually much better ways to get money than to just wish directly for the money, which we can get into that if you want. But anyway, I wished for $300 and said, let's just see what happens. And about 2 days later, I got a phone call from a major resort in the area saying, we have a group of dentists who have come into town, and they're looking for someone to talk to them for an hour and tell them some local stories and local legends, and they're paying $300, the exact amount that I had wished for. And I thought that was noteworthy. And since then, I continued to experiment, and again and again and again, I would find, via synchronicity, via coincidence, the things that I wished for would materialize. And there are some pretty extreme examples of that. I mean, the reason that I'm talking to you right now from a beachside condo in Puerto Rico is because I manifested this using my wishing machine. I was sitting in the mountains in the middle of February in a blizzard, shivering with my power blinking in and out, and I said, I don't think I want to be here for winter anymore. And so I got on the internet, and I looked up I just typed in tropical beaches, and a bunch of pictures came up, and I saved one, and I printed it out, and I put it on the machine, and tuned it, and then I'm going to say maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks later, I got an email from a guy in Puerto Rico, and he said, I would like to pay for you to come down here and investigate my house, because I've got a lot of activity. So anyway, I ended up going to Puerto Rico. While I was here, I ended up meeting a real estate agent, and she showed me this place in Boquerón. It's a little fishing village on the southwest side of the island. Beautiful place, and a nice gated complex with a swimming pool, the whole 9 yards. And I said, I think I can actually work this out and afford to get this place. So I went back to my house in Asheville. I told my wife, pack the bags, we're going to Puerto Rico. And I looked over at my machine, and I looked at the little picture, and I said, man, this thing really works. And I picked up that picture, and then I became curious, and I thought, I wonder what this is a picture of exactly. And I found that picture on my computer. I brought it up. I searched for it again. That was a picture of the Boquerón beach, the one right here. that I could almost throw a baseball and hit. Now, that could have been any beach, any tropical beach in the world. And the fact that I printed that picture out, not even knowing what beach it was, put it on the machine, and I'm now talking to you from that location. To me personally, that is absolutely undeniable proof. That's rock solid proof that this is a technology, that it can do incredible things. We don't know for a fact how it works, but I do have some ideas about how it works, if you want to get into that as well.
Absolutely. And before we get into that, this has basically my introduction with radionics as well too. I started looking into it about 2 years ago, and there is a person who I was introduced to by a friend who lives out in Tawasin here in BC, and basically she had this kind of very expensive version, about the $10,000 version of the radionics, and I was just so curious. So what is this? This is something that, is it back in like Atlantean technology or Egyptian technology? Where does all this come from? And she was she's answering a lot of questions that I was providing. And I just had a few certain forms of illnesses that I had, just being able to have like problems with the back, problems with the knees, etc. Sometimes getting headaches. And she was basically able to utilize this radionics machine, and within a couple days, all of that stuff went away. And I was very curious about the type of model that she had. And she said, "Oh yeah, if you got like $10,000, maybe you could probably grab this box." I said, "Well, I don't think I have that kind of money, but thank you so much for demonstrating this." And of course, that's when I just kind of stumbled upon Dr. Mulder's boxes a few months afterwards, and might as well show this to the crowd as well too. This is my own little radionics box that I just was able to create. I've been working on it now for about 3 days. It's finally finished today. So just like what Joshua had to show with you guys, basically here is the input plate. This is again where you put the intention. This is the plastic rubbing plate where you would put the output. And of course we have 4 dials as well too. So I was just about to test this out today, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make sure I get this on air today, because now I got my own little makeshift prototype box, and it's really exciting. I was actually just talking to Dr. Mulder last night and earlier today as well too. I said, you know what, it's really fun making these boxes. But he said, you know what, I'm going to send clients to you because you're the guy that can just do this so quickly. It took me over 3 days to make that thing, so I don't think I could be doing that full time. But and Dr. Mulder just does an incredible job of being able to put so much great amplification in the boxes as well too. And he's been showing me a lot of photos about the kind of boxes he's created, and it's absolutely amazing. And of course that is the Wishing Machine Project, of course wishingmachineproject.com, which we're going to have up in the archived recording as well too. So for me, it felt like it has been a really great, incredible booster, because like I've asked for financial abundance. I've asked for being able to go on certain trips as well too, and I have been able to do that. So what I always tell people is saying that you are the operator. You're the one that's putting this intention into the box, and all the box is functioning as a device to anchor in this vibration like a radio. So basically that's what they call it, radionics, radio psionics, right? So being able to put that information in there. But I'm very fascinated to hear about some other successes you've had with your boxes as well too.
Well, and by the way, congratulations on building your first box. We were talking about
nice little prototype.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the results that you have, and it just goes to show. I mean, there are many different forms that this machine can take, and you're right. Some people do pay thousands and thousands of dollars for these, and I think again, my first one that I bought, I paid $300 for it, and it worked just fine. And the ones that Dr. Mulder makes, they work better than anything I've ever used. Absolutely. And they only cost a few $100s. And I personally, I don't think it's necessary to spend thousands of dollars on a machine. And that's one of the things that, one of the reasons that Dr. Mulder and I created the Wishing Machine Project was to make these things as accessible as possible. And right now there are thousands of people around the world who are using these machines, and we're trying to keep track of their results best we can and catalog it into some kind of a database, because otherwise it's hard to sort of condense all this down into some kind of a scientific test. I mean, how do you take these variables, they're unique for each person, and put them into a lab environment? But, one of my favorite news stories, and I could, well, maybe I won't, but I was going to say I could grab an item that would also illustrate this. my sister, actually, let me start by saying this. Last year, we sold a box to a man in Canada, and after he bought it, he contacted us, and he said that he was a professional metal detector. And he said that he'd been metal detecting for at least 20 years, and that he'd never in all that time found something made of gold with diamonds in it. And that just always kind of nagged at him that he'd never found something gold made with gold with diamonds. So he tuned his machine specifically. I want to find something gold with diamonds in it, because he was going to go out metal detecting a couple days later. His schedule ended up changing, and he did not get to go metal detecting. But nonetheless, he happened to be walking down the street, and he looked down, and lo and behold, here is a gold bracelet with diamonds in it. And he was just tickled that he found this. So after he told me this story, I said, well, I'm going to try that out. Because, I mean, I've got, I don't even know how many, I've got at least a dozen of these machines that are running all the time. And, if you're not already, you'll end up the same way, Brad. It's like, you can use one machine for one thing at a time, and you end up, we have like a bunch of these things working on different stuff.
Yeah. I actually got 3 machines right now. So my 3rd machine right here, so I'll be working on that stuff. I'm getting another one from Dr. Mulder here in the next couple of days. I've already ordered 2 boxes to make 2 new Radionics myself, so I'll have like 5 or 6 machines I'll be playing with like crazy here. So
you're well on.
Yeah, I'm turning into Dr. Mulder in a very small way.
That's cool. And so so I took the machine, I took one of my machines, I said, okay, I'm going to devote it to this. I want to find something gold with diamonds in it. And I tuned it and I put it aside. Well, a few days later, my sister came down, her name is Jessica, and she came down to visit from North Carolina here in Puerto Rico. She'd never been to Puerto Rico before. And so obviously my wife and I turned all of our attention toward entertaining Jessica and showing her around. And we love to snorkel. That's one of the reasons that I'm here. And so we all went to this little island off the coast of Puerto Rico called Gilligan's Island.
Uh-huh.
And this was on a Monday. There was practically nobody else around. And at one point, I swam out to this little corner of the island. And it was a beautiful day. And I sat down on the floor of the sea with the water about up to my neck, and I'm just relaxing in the sun. And at that point, my wife came over and she sat down next to me. Now, my wife loves seashells. She just collects little seashells and stuff like that, sea glass. So whenever she's around, I start seeing if I can find a nice shell or something for her. So I reach down and I start feeling around in the sand, and I plucked from the sand a men's 14-karat gold ring with 9 diamonds in it. Again, I wish I should have had this ring sitting here. I can put my hands on it shortly if you want to see it. And this ring perfectly fit my finger. I don't wear it that much because, frankly, it's a little blingy for me. But I like to wear it if I go to the casino or something like that because I think it's lucky. When I pulled that ring out of the sand, and I've never found anything like that before. You should have heard the words that came out of my wife's mouth. And that to me, it kind of sent a little chill down my spine, and it was just another little example of how incredibly detailed the manifestations can be. And I've gotten to the point now where I've already wished for all the big stuff. I mean, I have a wonderful life. I couldn't really ask for more. And so now, every day, when I get up and I start my day, I have a machine that I'll just walk by and I'll just pause for a moment and I'll just set it just to have something fun happen, or just to have a little bonus added to my day. And not too long ago, I had a pair of headphones that went bad, and I need a nice new pair of like professional headphones, and because I do a lot of radio work. And here on the west coast of Puerto Rico, I mean, we don't even have a Best Buy or anything like that. So, I mean, you're not going to easily find professional headphones. But nonetheless, I tweaked my little machine. I was thinking I could use some headphones today. So I went to the grocery store that day by myself. And on the way there, I passed a Radio Shack. And I was like, oh, I forgot that there was a Radio Shack over here. Let me go check this place out. So I walked into the Radio Shack. Turns out that was their last day in business. They had everything marked off like 95 or more %. And I bought a pair of headphones that retail for well over $200 for like $15 or something like that. Perfect pair of headphones. And I just like, I didn't even think I was going to find nice headphones, much less get them for next to nothing. So, you know, if for people who experiment with this stuff, what I would say is it's natural, again, for you to start with, oh, I want $1 million, or, you know, I want a mansion by the sea, or whatever it is. It's natural to start with that stuff. But you get to a point where you realize this can just enhance your experience every day, regardless of what you're up to. And for those people who want $1 million, what I have discovered is that if you want $1 million, that's fine. But the easiest thing to do is to think about what you would buy with that $1 million, and to tune the machine for what you want instead of the money, because the money is just a means to an end. So if you want that mansion on the cliff in Maine with the waves crashing on the rocks, and you think that's going to cost you, you know, $5 million, don't sit down and wish for $5 million. Wish for the mansion on the cliff, because that's something that's tangible, that suddenly stirs up an emotional source of energy within you. And that's what these machines seem to connect with. I think that these machines actually do employ a technology, and in my opinion, and I think Dr. Mulder would tell you the same thing, I think it has a lot to do with the crystals that are inside them. And not all machines employ crystals, but the best ones do. The difference between this simply being some kind of a little, you know, emblem that you place your faith in, and this being a technology, has to do with the circuit that's inside. And this is my opinion. So let me put it this way: if I want to drive from point A to point B, I can get a map, and I can read that map, and it will tell me how to get there. But it requires a lot of my attention. It requires me going back and forth, looking at the map, occasionally pulling over, turning on the light perhaps. I mean, it takes a lot of work. Or I can just take my little GPS unit there, punch in my destination, hit go. It might not be 100% effective, but it will automatically tell me where to go and get me there. And I think that when you start using the Force, what you're using is, again, this mechanism called sympathetic resonance. When you use one of these boxes, I think we're using what's called automated sympathetic resonance. So you put your intention into the box and you tune it, and it continues to sit there and work for you even when you are distracted and you decide to go think about what you're going to have for dinner tonight. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Hitachi has already put out news releases saying they have invented a chip that's made from quartz. It's a quartz crystal chip that is about the size of a postage stamp, and it's very thin. Think of it like a microscope slide, maybe chopped in half. And this thin little chip is capable of storing hundreds of terabytes of data. And it's so durable that they have subjected it to thousands of degrees Fahrenheit for up to 2 hours, and it does not affect the chip or the data or anything on it. Now, if this little sliver of quartz crystal is capable of storing that kind of information, what do you think happens when you take these more substantial chunks of different crystals and you incorporate them into a device, and then you take your own mind and your bioenergy with your intentions and your visions and whatever, and you connect with that through the device, and you're able to tune it. I think that what we have here is it's still in its infancy, really, but it's a technology that is going to pave the way for this new era in which the relationship between the mind and the body and the technology that we use is seamless and is much more organic.
Exactly. And that's the amazing thing with the radionics as well too, is like just being able to kind of, like, I even looked in the internet as well too and saw what other people who are designing the boxes as well too, and it's amazing what actually you can see inside these boxes. It's never a recommendation to open these boxes because everything is basically to be intact and working for you, especially with Dr. Mulder, because he builds boxes specifically for you. So some people are saying, well, Brad, I'm wondering if I should just like kind of pry it open and take a look and see what's inside. I said, well, you probably have a lot of stuff spilling out, right? So being able to keep it in, but being able to look into just like these very simple boxes, because it's amazing about how they are built, but being able to see the amplification as well too, because like Dr. Mulder uses like a lot of antennas as well too. He uses crystals, orgone, etc. And it's amazing about just these little boxes that can really just amplify things, and you really see very quick results.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes it happens instantly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, depending on what it is. And I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying regarding cymatics, that when you create an energy mold, then ultimately what you're doing is providing sort of like a standing wave, if you want to visualize it that way, for the matter that's out there to sort of eventually fall into and adhere to. And so the bigger your wave, the more has to change, and the more has to rearrange in order to create this effect. And when a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't dig it up every other day to see if it's growing or not. That would actually be counterproductive. It would destroy the process. And so once you set the machine, for one thing, you want to make sure you do it properly. And we're very good, as you know, about educating people on how to use these. Mm-hmm. And once you set the machine, if you do it properly and you put it aside, then it can happen very, very quickly. Speaking of education, on our website, wishingmachineproject.com, if you click the news section and scroll down, there are hours and hours and hours of free instructional content. There are videos, there are audio clips. If you buy a machine, you get instructions with it. I have a documentary that I made. I did a big wishing machine workshop in Asheville last year, and we turned it into a movie. It's called the Wishing Machine Workshop Movie, where I dig really, really deep into this material and how and why I think these things work and the most effective techniques. There are a number of ways that you can use them, and some are more comfortable for certain people, and you just have to figure out which method you like. But you have to buy the machine and then understand how to properly tune it. And if you buy it and you understand how to use it, then it practically works for everybody. We have a testimonials page there on the website, and I can't even keep up with the testimonials that come in. Every day there are new ones that just come flooding in, and you can read about the successes that people have had, and we put everything there verbatim. We edit out some of the personal details if somebody doesn't want their name or maybe their address or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can go read what real people all over the world have experienced, and I think it's amazing that this functions regardless of the country that you're in or the culture that you're in. This is not something that is sort of limited to the view of a particular culture's mindset. That's why I say this is more than just something to aid in one's faith. It's more than wishful thinking. It's more than some kind of a vision board or vision box. I truly believe this is a technology.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's interesting too because I even looked into a lot of research into psionics as well too. And when you look into psionics as well, some of the stuff that comes up on YouTube is radionics, 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 right? So there's even some really impressive physicists, professors as well too, that all talk about how the science of radionics and psionics works. Basically, what I would say is that when you're looking into the science of radionics and psionics, you're looking into Nikola Tesla style physics and science. And that's where I think is the true science in that particular way, because the kind of science that really is unleashed, the one that truly is the horizon altogether, is the ones that are truly observable, truly subjective, and realizing that through your own intentions, through what you put into the intention and letting that come through the universe, through radionics box, is basically what you are receiving, and of course it's all measurable in that way of subjectivity. And again, that's looking into the true coherency, and that's all energy is. Energy itself would be what you would know as condensed consciousness coherency. So basically, a lot of scientists on a modern level can't tell you what energy is, right? So being able to look into the idea that everything is coherent, relating to what you are sending out pertaining to your intention, and letting that go out to the universe, it's no more different than if you were like in a Zen state of meditation. And being able to really pump out this energy and letting this broadcast come through the universe. So this is, again, a really great handy tool because it's just helping you to anchor that particular frequency while you are also doing other things. Now maybe I want to go deeper into my spiritual advancement. Now I want to go on a trip. I want to go on a vacation, whatever it may be. And that box is always continuing to work until you're ready to retune it. So to me, I think it's a fantastic thing, just being able to be introduced into this and knowing that in times past, because I look into a lot of the ancient histories, this is exactly what the Atlanteans used in regards to a lot of the times of Atlantis, because they're amazing healers. They had all kinds of incredible technologies, and the crystals that they used were very much on par with radionics technology. So again, it's a very fascinating field. But I want to get back into the paranormal right now, because it's just so much of a fascinating topic that we were discussing before we got into talking about the earlier criteria. But really with the paranormal, like you were mentioning about the cryptids. Now, have you had some particular types of experiences with the cryptids yourself personally?
Yeah, I have actually. I've never sort of seen a Bigfoot, I've been out in the field, and I have seen, weird, like scratches on trees and hair and all that kind of stuff. But I had an experience that I was just talking about the other day. I think this happened to me in 2011. Well, for one thing, I wrote a book called Pet Ghosts, Animal Encounters from Beyond the Grave. And I never really liked the title. The publisher gave it the title because the book is about more than just pets like dogs and cats. It also is about, phantomals, as I call them, interdimensional creatures and cryptids and like Mothman and, dinosaur ghosts. And so I've always been sort of, mindful of these things and that these creatures can exist. And that really, if you look at all this from a scientific point of view, there is absolutely nothing scientifically that proclaims life must exist exclusively at this particular frequency that we call physical. In fact, humans are incredibly egocentric, and we are able to perceive a ridiculously narrow slice of what is out there. I mean, we can see a very tiny band of frequencies. We can hear a very tiny band. And so we have, tools that help us to see more, but even those tools are very, very limited in what they can do. So that said, I had Nick Redfern on, I have a radio show called Speaking of Strange. And I was interviewing Nick Redfern one night about black dogs. And now Nick Redfern is an English author. He's a good friend of mine. He's written some fantastic books. And black dogs, also known as hellhounds, are especially common around Europe. Mm-hmm. And these are dogs that they, at first glance, they kind of look like that they maybe are just regular large dogs. But then when you get a better look, they're certainly not. They often will have like glowing red eyes, or there are some famous cases in which they do horrific things. Even going back to 1587, I think, there was a church in England, a place called Bungay, and in the middle of a church session, this hulking black dog just tore in there and ripped 3 people to pieces. Wow. It was so dense that when it was jumping around, it was breaking off pieces of masonry, and there was this incredible heat emanating from its body, this withering heat, and on its way out the door, it burned this big scorch mark on the door, which you can see to this day. So we were talking about black dogs and hellhounds and whatnot on the show, and the show ended rather late, and so afterward, I and some of my colleagues were on the way to the bar for about a 1 a.m. nip before bedtime, and I was driving ahead of everybody else, and we were going on a back road. At this point, I wasn't even thinking about black dogs or anything. I was thinking about getting to the bar, and so there were no other cars around, and I was approaching this bridge that goes over the French Broad River. And up ahead in my headlights, I see this big black form. Now, at first, I thought there was a black bear in the road because, again, this is the mountains of western North Carolina. Black bears are fairly common. But as I got closer, I quickly realized this was no black bear. This creature, it was on all fours, but it had a face that I can only describe as looking like a bat. A big, almost gargoyle-like bat face with little ears. And these bright, bright, shining eyes. Now, they weren't red, they were white. But it wasn't, I mean, I guess it could have just been the reflection from my headlights, but it sure looked a lot different than what I'm used to seeing when that happens with an animal.
Yeah.
And so I stopped my car. The thing looks at me. It's frozen for a bit, and then it starts running off toward the vegetation, toward the river. And right as the thing was about to go through the weeds, because I wanted to make sure that I saw her went into the weeds so that I could get footprints, it disappeared. Now that was as tangible and as solid. I got out of my car with a flashlight. The folks behind me got out of the car like, "What's going on?" I said, "There's some kind of creature." I said, I don't know what it was. He just disappeared. So we started looking around, and suddenly I became very afraid. I just had this
major fear,
almost like inexplicable sense of fear that overcame me, and I said, I think we need to go. I think we need to get out of here. And so we left. Now, it wasn't until I got to the bar and I'm retelling what I saw to my friends that I realized, oh my God, I just interviewed Nick Redfern like 2 hours ago about black dogs and hellhounds. They're often seen around bridges. They're, water, which that's another key. You find patterns when it comes to many of these paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, and actually I had a lot of good comments on that as well too, but I'll let you.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because people, unfortunately, they look at the Earth as this big, passive blue ball just sort of spinning in space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it could not be further from the truth. The Earth is an extremely dynamic machine with circuits of energy that are surging around it all the time and changing and shifting. And just the other day, I read a story how the scientists are claiming the core of the Earth is 2 years younger than the crust of the Earth, because that the material at the center of the Earth is in a stronger gravitational field. And because that gravity slows time, the matter at the center of the Earth is younger than it is farther away on the crust. So, I mean, if you can imagine all these sort of mind-bending forces that are at work here, whether we're talking about extraterrestrials coming here from afar, or these sort of avenues that interdimensional beings and creatures might use in order to appear or disappear, you definitely find these types of highways where paranormal activity is prevalent. And water, it clearly falls on that pathway for a geologic reason, but that also represents other aspects of the energy environment that are grid-like as well.
Exactly. And when I get into the comments, I just want to tell everybody who's tuning in today to the chat, who's watching this live, you can go ahead and get ready to present some questions to Joshua. We're going to be going into Q&A here in about 10-15 minutes. So to everybody on the chat who's tuning in, feel free to type in your question, and I'll just be kind of scouring the chat here in a few minutes, and then we'll be getting to some live questions because those are always fun. But basically what I was looking into just a few days ago was a friend of mine posted an article about werewolves, and that there is this one werewolf that was basically sighted in the United Kingdom. And basically what I've discovered is, even in the article, that this has been a phenomenon that's been happening for many years. And they basically follow a type of triangular formation. And what I've discovered is that werewolves themselves are actually astral entities. Basically what happens, it actually begins with the person who's very cold-hearted. It's basically people who are really into black magic, and who have really been able to go into these altered states of consciousness. And what they do is they develop a thought-form body, a created body in that way. There's other astral entities that actually come into the imbuement of that body and making it very animalistic, like these kind of werewolves, or again like the large creature that you were talking about as well too. And basically they're coming in and they're terrifying the neighborhood. They're eating dogs, they're killing animals, they're attacking people. This is actually even happening in Brazil, I think, as well too, that they've had werewolf sightings as well. But they're basically a lot of black magicians, and basically they can only come out mainly in a full moon, which is again a lot of what the folklore tells us as well too, is that every full moon it comes out. And of course when the full moon is at its zenith, that's when we have the most powerful energies on the planet. So these particular black magicians basically doing this just for a state of lust, of bloodlust in that particular way, manifest this particular form of astral body. And they start working together with these other, you could say, archons in that particular way, that are actually coming in and just starting to kind of demonize the type of body and making it very animalistic. So I saw reports of reading this article and just seeing the creature is 8.5 feet tall, looks just like a wolf, walking on two legs, and the legs on the bottom kind of felt like they're goat-like, kind of like a goat-like legs, and just terrorizing people, and basically eyewitness reports about all this happening. And of course there's a lot of other stuff with the chupacabra, and quite a few other cryptids in that particular way. But what I've discovered through very commonality is that many of them have paths. They basically walk very different paths in that way, but it still remains a routine throughout decades or perhaps even centuries as well too. And basically this is what is a container. And so they're actually in a state of container pertaining to their path. So it's kind of like looking at a type of alchemy with symbols that are carved out in regards to triangles based upon ancient alchemical practices. And so they will manifest these particular bodies. They will influence these types of archons that will bond together with the bodies as kind of a sacrifice in that way. So it does get pretty black and magic, but it's amazing about how all of these things have been administered and how this has also been happening for centuries and still reoccurring to this day.
Absolutely. In fact, you mentioned the chupacabra, and a lot of people don't realize that the chupacabra originated here in Puerto Rico. And unfortunately, a lot of folks, because of the way the media has treated that subject, they think of the chupacabra as being a mangy coyote running around the American Southwest. Mm-hmm. But actually, the real chupacabra reports that started here in Puerto Rico officially in 1995, even though I've discovered that there are some pretty good reports of creatures doing the same kind of thing going back at least 100 years.
Yes.
It really deals with a creature that is not within the realm of ordinary biology in any way. Usually the people who actually see the chupacabra here describe like a 4-foot-tall, bipedal, hunched, alien-looking creature with large black eyes, fangs, with spines running down its back. Mm-hmm. Frequently will have wings, and often when someone will see this creature, for one thing, they're terrified. It scares the bejesus out of them, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And they say that it also seems startled. There's never been a report of it attacking anybody, to my knowledge. And they say that they'll sort of lock eyes with it, and then, and people have a difficulty describing this, but they say it looks like a sort of blurry whirlwind will start swirling around it, and then it sort of shoots away into the sky and disappears.
Yeah. So this is giving you the idea that it has that kind of black magic energy, because even though it has a practical physical being, which represents a created body, they're still doing these incredible feats, right? Being able to either like leap very tall, like the werewolf does. It's very agile. It's able just to leap like many feet in the air, and you just can't even imagine how it's done. Like even a common wolf couldn't even leap that large. With the chupacabra, just seeing these things appear and disappear, materialize and dematerialize, is giving you the idea that there's some very interesting density work pertaining to these beings, and that they're just very much like a living conscious projections in that way that can just dissolve in and dissolve out of matter.
Yeah, you know what? That's right, and it shows you that these things, often they will look just normal enough, like the black dog, so you can recognize them for having certain animal-like characteristics, but they're just shifted far enough to show us they didn't evolve on the same plane under these circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah, that's for sure. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into the chat, and we're going to take some questions. So for, again, everybody tuning in, if you just want to go ahead and repost your questions, that just leaves less scrolling for me. So if you guys do have questions, please feel free to post it in the chat here for Josh. There was one particular question I think there was about a person who wants to build their own radionics box as well too. How much would it cost? And I'd say, well, you'd have to find a lot of electronic stores. You'd probably have to go to a lot of different hardware stores. And I think it really depends upon the box as well too. Has people asked you about that? Or saying, what if I want to build my own box? How would this work?
Yeah, and the first thing I would say is I would read some books written by a man named Charles Cosimano. And when I was a teenager, my very first job was working at a bookstore. I worked at B. Dalton Booksellers for a while, and that's where I discovered books by Charles Cosimano. His last name is spelled Cosimano. And one of his books is called Psionic Power, Psionic, Psionic Power. That's a good one. In fact, I think if you go to his website, I believe it's probably like Cosimano.com, you might even be able to download that for free. His books are, they're fun to read. He's a great writer. They're very witty. He has a wicked sense of humor. But he's very instructional, and he gives you some really good tips on how to build things. And they can be as simple or as elaborate as you want. I choose to buy my machines, and that one of the reasons is I feel better using something that looks well made, and I am not a crafty kind of guy. I'm not the kind of guy who sits down and builds things with my hands that look good. I've never been. I can write books. I can compose a song for you. But I've never been good at sitting down and like machining something. Now you don't have to do that. You can use a cigar box and whatever you have around the house to make some very basic types of units to start experimenting with. But I believe there's going to come a point at which you're going to want something that looks nice, that feels nice, and that is really made by an expert. And Dr. Mulder, he makes the very best wishing machines in the world. And I've experimented with a lot of different machines, and I've played with some of these machines that cost thousands of dollars. And his are great because, for one thing, he not only is always experimenting himself to perfect his machines, but he also has become just a voracious student of radionics and psionics. I mean, his laboratory, and of course, his real name is not Dr. Mulder, But he's a very private man. If you put his real name out there, then people are going to beat a path to his door and climb in his windows at night to get the guy who makes wishing machines, right?
Yep.
So that's what we call him Dr. Mulder. But at his workshop's a very real place. And I recently posted a picture of his workshop on my website. Actually, I have a free e-newsletter that I send out, and I hope everybody watching this who's enjoying it will go and sign up for my free e-newsletter, because when you do that, I will send you a free good luck charm. So you don't want to miss. But I sent out an e-newsletter recently that had a picture attached to it from inside of his laboratory. And his laboratory the wall is just filled with boxes. It looks wild.
Yeah. He showed me a picture of those boxes, of the wall with all the boxes on it. Yeah.
Well, one of the things he has that I envy him having this, because I'd love to have it in my museum. He has a big, heavy cabinet radionics machine that's got to be 100 years old, that was actually owned by Hieronymus. Mm-hmm. And Hieronymus was one of the great pioneers of radionics. He's the only guy, I believe, to hold a patent when it comes to this kind of technology. And Dr. Mulder, by, again, just incredible synchronicity, was able to meet with some of his relatives and acquire this giant antique Hieronymus machine. And he actually uses that machine as well when he is charging some of the components for the machines that he makes. And so, again, long story short, you can make these yourself. I invite everybody to play with that. But there's probably going to come a point where you'll want something that a real pro has sat down and made as well.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, too. Like, even with the box that I've made that took me 3 days, it is nowhere near the close of caliber to what Dr. Mulder can create as well, too. And like he says, well, you know what, Brad, we all start from somewhere, right? So that's your first prototype box, and it's really, really, like, he liked it. I showed him a picture of it. He thought it was really good. But I still have a long way to go, up into where he is relating to the boxes. But we have another good question here. Here's a question. It says, what is the story with vampires? Have you looked into vampires? Have you had particular types of occurrences in your work relating to vampires?
Yes. Well, when I went to Transylvania, I did a lot of prep for that. And so I not only read a great deal about vampires, but I also just put a lot of thought in general into the lore behind vampires and what makes sense and what doesn't. And it occurred to me, well, first off, let me start by saying that I don't know that we can say a vampire is literally, some person who has died and come back from the grave and sucks people's blood. I think that is an exaggeration, basically.
Folklore, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Essentially, a vampire is somebody who is able to tap in to another person or another thing's energy and parasitically take it. Now, you can do that in a more extreme way by sucking their blood if you want, but I don't think that's that common. There are a lot of people out there who are vampires who will take your energy from you. I mean, they're all over the place. And some of these people also, I believe, are able to shapeshift to some degree. Mm-hmm. It's funny, all of us shapeshift. We call it aging. It just happens very slowly.
Yep.
But I didn't always look like this, and I'm not always going to look like this. So the concept of shapeshifting is something that is not impossible, but I do think that there are people who they spend so much time sort of delving and dwelling within that realm of the body and energy sort of connection that they're able to transform the way they appear to a certain degree. But I find it especially intriguing that most people probably realize that silver has an incredibly antibiotic property. Mm-hmm. Back in the old days, if you had a wound and there was a silver coin around, you'd put that silver coin in there and sew it up. I mean, they used to do that. Or sailors used to put a silver coin in their wine so that it wouldn't spoil on long voyages. Okay. And a lot of people now will take a little mixture of colloidal silver on maybe a daily basis in order to maintain health. And it's interesting to me that vampires don't like silver,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that goes back to an age when people were experiencing these sort of dark vampiric beings. They didn't understand what they were dealing with, so they associated them with something bad, like parasites or like disease. And they said, well, silver cures this disease. Maybe silver also will defeat the
With
vampire.
its
And so
purity. Yeah, exactly. The purity that comes from.
yes.
Yeah.
So you get silver objects being used against vampires and werewolves, and in a lot of other cases, we're dealing with some kind of a dark paranormal entity. And so, there is a reality there that we're dealing with, but I feel that all of us, to a certain extent, are kind of vampiric. Sadly enough, we all have this ability to suck somebody else's energy, but you should also try to give a little bit. And it's those people who just take much more than they give that I think are the true vampires.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think it's very interesting because we have many different types of vampires when we look at it. You have people who have basically want to vampire the idea of emotions, that want to vampire the idea of life force. Again, it's kind of like looking into the werewolf phenomena as well too, with a person who is very much into black magic, who again will manifest that particular type of body and do a bunch of awful stuff. The whole idea really is that what I feel is that when we really buy into a lot of disempowerment in that sense, that's what fuels this type of energy, because a lot of what they seek is that idea of remaining in a state of impurity, staying in that particular point of fear so that they can take advantage of that. So what I would always say to anybody is that, I don't know how many people watching this broadcast tonight encounters vampires on a regular basis, but not, of course, the folklore vampires, but I think a lot of us in that way, the world vampires that we do pertaining to people that want to usurp energies and that stuff, is just to, again, stand in your light. And that's what I always want to do in the Reality Whisperer Webcast, is making sure that everyone feels empowered. And even though we talk a lot about these spooky things, it's all just part of realizing what is the world. The world really is this amazing enigma that contains all kinds of incredible life forms, that contains all kinds of interesting phenomena. But really the whole key here is really just being able to keep yourself empowered, to know that interventional energies are always around you. You always have support. You're always taken care of. You got something like a Radionics box, hey, you're good. You got quite a few of them as well too. You're quite good. But even just going into the point of meditation and really being able to understand the power of meditation, of the connection of your intentions, and realizing that you're living your life in complement to yourself. That is really where you're in an alignment that truly shows a lot more joy and prosperity in your life than anything that may be frightening. So it's great we talk about these things, but of course, you always have the power. We do have one question here. It says, "Hi, Brad and Joshua. I bought the Force box last night. Looking forward to receiving it." He goes into a question with me. He says, "Brad, can I use the light circuitry on it?" Now, I do something called light circuitry. It's basically using symbols, and of course, they have encoded subconscious information into this as well too. I've talked to Dr. Mulder about this. He thinks it's kind of cool. To the answer here to the person, 4 cheeky monkeys. The answer is yes. You can certainly use your light circuitry on the box. Put that as part of the input signal when you're doing your intention as well too. So absolutely. Or you can even use it as an output box if it has the intention equaled out to what it is that you're looking to produce. So very good. There was another good question here. Let me just see if I can find it. Just have to scroll up here, I think. Okay. There's a lot of people just commenting, so let me see. Scroll down a bit. Okay, here we go. Here's one from Bag. Bag asks, "How often is it that random spirits or passed away loved ones observe us in a haunted setting or elsewhere? What should we do if we feel we're being observed by ghosts or being around ghostly spirits?"
Well, that really depends, I guess, on how it makes you feel. Some people feel very comforted to have spirits of, say, deceased loved ones around. In fact, it's quite common throughout history for various cultures to anticipate that and to talk to them and to, tap into their protective powers and their wisdom. But if you're in a situation where you're in a house that's your property, it's your domain, and you feel like that some spirit is trespassing there and you don't want them there, well, then it's certainly within your right to tell them to leave. And you know what? I get people all the time who are asking, how do you get rid of a spirit? The easiest thing to do is to just tell them to leave. That works most of the time. If you have a serious moment, whether you can see the spirit or not, if you know it's there, if you feel it, and you tell it to go, most of the time it will go. Sometimes you have to be a little forceful, but that's okay. If that doesn't work, well, then there are a number of other simple steps that you can take. I know this sounds like crazy old superstition, but if you sprinkle salt around places in your house where spirits are seen, frequently that will stop the activity. Now, the reason being, I believe, what is salt? Salt is a crystal.
Mm-hmm. You got it.
And so we've talked about, again, how crystals are transducers. They change energy. Yep. And they change it from one form to another. You know, you take just a quartz crystal, you apply pressure to it, it produces electricity. You apply electricity to it, it resonates. So by putting crystals like salt or other crystals in places that are active, sometimes that will stop the activity. Also, now, since we live in a world surrounded by all of these powerful electrical devices that are producing electromagnetic fields, we create this very chaotic sort of electrical setting. And so sometimes you can rearrange your furniture if that's not a big pain. You can rearrange like some of your appliances, some of your electrical equipment, and that will stop it. But something that stops it more than, if you have to get to the physical realm, more than anything, if you get something serious, like there's something that you think is manifesting that's physically attacking you, if you run a humidifier around that area where the activity usually manifests, it will never happen again. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's because when these things actually materialize from the non-physical to the physical, they are using electric charges as an interface, an actual point there where they can transition from one form to another. And running a humidifier at that spot prevents these electrostatic charges from building up, and it neutralizes that interface. And so I definitely would recommend that. If you have something that's more extreme that can't be solved by those things, well then you probably need to talk to an expert, because you have to break it down into the very specific case-per-case basis. But generally speaking, there's no need to fear a spirit unless it is something that has harmful intentions towards you.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And it may even be that, when you have these spiritual encounters as well, it may just be a loved one that's coming into your space as well too, that wants to talk to you as well too. It may just be that you're moving into a new house, and maybe it was your great-grandmother's, and it's your great-grandmother's spirit that's still walking around, that still has, again, a lot of attachments to a lot of the anchors, so to speak, placed within the environment as well. But of course, if you have hostile spirits, if there's something there that, you try to negotiate, you try to talk and say, I would like to talk to you, and it's just, there's anger, then absolutely, I would say really talk to someone who can really come in and give you some really good guidance on how to assist with that as well. Well, Joshua, this has been an incredible interview with you. Again, the first time you and I have talked as well, we've talked over some emails, but I've really enjoyed a really wonderful broadcast here tonight with you as special guest. And again, for anybody who wants to check you out more, would you be able to share your website once again?
Absolutely. My website is joshuapwarren.com. There is no period after the P. If you go to joshuapwarren.com, you'll find all kinds of amazing pictures and video clips and a lot of cool free stuff to enjoy. And again, I hope you'll sign up for the free e-newsletter there, and I will immediately send you a free good luck charm that I think you'll enjoy. But Brad, I want to tell you, I've had fun. You do a great job. This is a wonderful show, and thank you so much for having me as your guest.
Well, that's great. You're a great guest. You're a great guest as well, too. So I really appreciate it. And of course, there's wishingmachineproject.com. That is again Dr. Mulder's site, along with Joshua's documentary about the wishing machine as well, too. It is again. I just can't give my hats off enough to Dr. Mulder. He's a wonderful individual. I know he's getting very busy. He has a lot of orders, but he always takes some time to contact you if you guys have questions. And of course, he always wants to get to know why you want want to use the box, because we want to make sure that these intentions are very pure when you're using these boxes as well too, because it's all about being able to serve you and serve others as well in the long run. But again, feel free to check that out, wishingmachineproject.com, and of course those annotations will be up in the recorded archive. Well, Joshua, thank you so much. We will go ahead and wrap up the Skype call for now, and I'll drop you an email later as well too. Again, a personal thank you so much, and I look forward to having you again on the show again very soon.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Josh. You take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're just going to move back into the camera here. Just be a moment. If I can get my webcam on. Let me just check my properties here, so make sure that the web camera is on here. Okay, guys, for some reason it's having a little bit of a hard time trying to get my my video webcam on. But anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into tonight's broadcast. I really appreciate it. I'm just looking forward to next week and being able to share our special guest that's going to be coming next week, and that is Johnny Alpha. And you guys can check out Johnny Alpha on YouTube. Just type in Johnny Alpha, that's Johnnny, and last name Alpha. And you can just say Johnny Alpha Mars. And you'll be able to tune into his YouTube channel. And he has 3 really amazing videos there. And it would just be worth checking it out. This guy has an incredible amount of information. Joshua, again, was a really great guest tonight. And I'm just very happy that we're getting our very first guest on the program. It has so much information. And of course, next week we have a very informative guest as well, too. So I want to thank everybody who's tuned in tonight. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty here with the video camera. It's actually my first time trying to run Skype through the broadcaster software tonight. So I thought there would be no complications, but hey, things do happen. But thank you, everybody. Everybody who asked questions online as well through the chat room. Thank you so much for your presence tonight. And I look forward to speaking to you all next Tuesday night with, again, special guest Johnny Alpha of the Secret Space Program. Thank you again. Take care. Have a wonderful night. And talk to you next week. Namaste.